In this video, I'll walk through how to program marking or etching in WARDCam. So I often get a question about how to make marks like this on materials. So you can do it two ways. You can do it either with abrasive, like here on the left, or you can do it water only. Do it with abrasive, your etch marks are going to be a little bit wider. These little divots at your start and stop points will be a little bit more pronounced. Water only, it's going to be a much lighter etch. Have to go slower to get a little bit deeper etching in there. And this is all application dependent. There's no real database that tells you if you want to etch of a certain depth to use certain pressure, speed, abrasive flow rate. And those are the three basic parameters that you can adjust when it comes to marking: pressure, speed, and abrasive flow rate. And we'll show you how to change those things here. So I will say, if you are going to be doing marking, just be aware it is going to be a bit messier than normal cutting, since the water and the abrasive have nowhere to go. So good idea to make sure you use some sort of cover over the cutting head like this to minimize that spray back. Bring the water level up, if you can, slightly above the top of your material. That'll also help to keep down the mess. I'll just grab a part out of our shape library. And if I'm going to be doing some etching, I'll usually draw a line or something in a scrap area of the part. And when I have that in my cut geometry, I'm going to do that first. And that way it'll clear out any abrasive that might be in my abrasive line, so I get the proper amount of abrasive that I want to be using. So you can either draw it in your CAD geometry, or if you bring it here into WARDCam, I'm just going to use my line tool, and I'll just draw a line down here, and we'll do that first, and that'll clear out the abrasive out of my abrasive line, and therefore then be using the proper amount of abrasive or no abrasive when I actually get to the marking that I want to do. So of course we can mark text. If we brought in a font in with the DXF file, I'm just going to draw in a couple lines here. Could be bend lines or whatever. I'm going to draw a point in here. Maybe we want to drill a point later off the machine. So I could just draw a point, and the Waterjet will just go over and just do a marking on those points there. So once you've got the geometries that you want to mark, top right hand corner, hit your next tab, and then over here on the right we've got our marking tool. So you just click on that to activate that. Up here on the top, I've got my machine selected, and we'll just go with 16 gauge aluminum. So now, since I've got my marking tool turned on, as I hover near geometries, it'll highlight in the light blue, indicating that I can add marking to a geometry. So you can do it for closed geometries, open geometries, points. And I'm just going to go in the sequence I'm going to do these in. So I'm going to left click here on this line, it shows up in my cut order, and then I'll click on these points here that we're going to come over and do light marking on. And then I'll left click on this end of this line and this end of that line. And now we've got our cut sequence there. So once we've got our markings, hit our next button, add your cutting tool path like normal. Of course, you can use the up down buttons if you want to change cut sequence on any of these markings. WARDCam will put all the markings first, in the idea that if you do go into to low pressure for this, you do your low pressure marking first, and then it'll go to high pressure for the cutting. And we'll hit our next button. So now I'm going to go into the material database and show you the different settings for speed and such. So when you first come into the material database, down at the bottom, click on your advanced button, and on your marking tab, you've got your parameters, so you can adjust your feed rate for your marking. This point dwell is just on those 2 points that I drew in there. So this doesn't apply to any other geometries like those lines that I programmed to be marked. And then whether you want to use abrasive or not, and then whether you want the pump to go down to low pressure for the marking. So those are those parameters. You can adjust speed, with or without abrasive, and low or high pressure. So now that we've got that, can click on save and exit if we made any changes. Top left hand corner, we'll click on the CNC button, So at the beginning of the program, we've got the code to go and tell the pump to go into low pressure. We've got a delay to make sure that's in low pressure. And then based on the type mini hopper that you have on your machine, if you have our standard mini hopper, which is like here on the left, or manual mini hopper, you would at this point slide this slider down to whatever number corresponds with how much abrasive that you want to be using. So if you're going to be doing your marking at low pressure, you don't want your slider at your normal high pressure setting because that will overwhelm the cutting head with abrasive. Good place to start would probably be half of what you're normally cutting with. So if you're doing your marking at 20,000 psi, you might start at dropping this down to 3 and doing some tests there and see if that gives you what you want. But whatever number you determine that you want this mini hopper set at for your low pressure marking, if you are using abrasive, at this point the operator would move that slider down to that number. So there's the M00 code in there, which stops the machine, gives the operator the chance to adjust that manual mini hopper. And then once he hits continue on the controller, then it'll wrap it over. And this is that first etching that I put in the scrap area of the part to clear that abrasive out, make sure the pump's at down to whatever pressure I really want it at. And then I'll wrap it over, and then here's one of those pierce points just at the points. So we've got that 1 second delay that I showed in the material database. And then again it'll rapid and does the other point, rapids again, and then does the marking of the one line and then the marking of the other line. And then again we've got a code to tell the pump to go up to high pressure, and then there's an 8 second delay to make sure it goes into high pressure, and then the M00 so that the operator can then move that slider back up to the high pressure abrasive flow rate. And then once he hits continue, then it'll go and continue to do the cutting as normal. So I'll show you where you can change some of these settings. We do have an optional smart feed mini hopper, which is basically the RPMs of this wheel here, controls how much abrasive flows down to the cutting head. And this one has a circuit board in it that when the pump goes into low pressure, sends a signal to this, and then the wheel will spin at a lower rate, and you can calibrate what you want that rate to be. And then when the pump goes into high pressure, it'll automatically spin at its normal high pressure rate. So for people that are doing a lot of this type of work, they'll usually purchase this. If you're only doing it occasionally, then you've probably got your machine with this manual mini hopper. So if you do have the smart feed mini hopper, we don't need to put these M00s in here since that'll be controlled automatically. And to change things like that, let me put these side by side so we can see these. Go into options, edit variables, and if you go over to your Waterjet tab, first of all you scroll down here a bit, you've got things like your dwell after marking abrasive on and off, dwell after marking water on and off, so you can adjust these numbers here that show up. So right now we've got our dwell after water on marking set to half second, so if you wanted to reduce that you can change that. Dwell after abrasive on right now is set to half a second, so dwell after, that was the marking abrasive that I set to 0, so we'll do our dwell after marking abrasive on 0.1, so that'll change that one. Dwell after marking water on, we'll just set that one to 0. So that M00 for the mini hopper is controlled on the machine tab. If you scroll down, there's an option down here for standard mini hopper, so by default it's set to true. So if you do have the smart feed mini hopper, just click on that button and turn that off, and then it won't put the M00s in there. So if I go ahead and recreate this code, so we still get of course, the command to tell the pump to go into low pressure. We've got our delay, but no M00, since that'll be controlled automatically. And then we've got our initial marking there again in the scrap. So now that I set that dwell after marking water on set to 0, there's no dwell there, and then a very short dwell after the abrasive turns on and starts to move, so that'll minimize the divot there that you get at the start point. Then you do At the end of the cut here, we got our dwell after marking abrasive off right now set to 1/4 second. So again, that would be adjusted there. So the delays for your dwell after high pressure and low pressure are also controlled on this Waterjet tab. And those are here, dwell after high pressure, dwell after low pressure. So you can adjust these based on how your pump behaves. If you need more time, you can obviously adjust those. Another helpful tip to minimize this is before you even start cutting your program is if you manually turn the pump on and manually put the pump into low pressure, then you can minimize this dwell after low pressure time since the pump will already be in low pressure. And then one other tip would be if we go back to say that we've got a standard mini hopper on here and I recreate this. So since with the standard mini hopper we've already got the M00 in there, which is going to stop the machine anyways, you can minimize these delays because basically the operator can use this and allow enough time for the pump to get up to low pressure, looks at the high pressure gauge, makes sure it's at high or low pressure, and then can hit the continue button. So you can minimize these delays. In this case you could set them to 1 second or whatever it needs to be, but that M00 essentially could replace this delay here if you have the manual mini hopper. So if you have any questions on that, let us know. Thanks.